This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. I'm back after 2 weeks. This is episode 377. We are live on Twitch. I am so pumped to be here. I'm joined by two Spider People anomalies in your friendly neighborhood Spider comic book creator, Danny.
Hello.
And
Sorry.
Kara.
You made a reference. You referenced the thing that I saw today. I'm so excited.
And the voice of the face that you cannot see right now, the one and only comic book creator, friend of the show, Kevvo.
Hello, I'm here.
We're so happy to have you back on the show. I'm super excited to talk about comic books with all of you. I've been restrained in another universe for 2 years, and Paul had to step in for me. I'm finally back, and boy, I'm about to explode. I have a quick announcement or a series of announcements to go through before we actually start to talk about comic books. So, July is coming. We're taking a month off as we usually do every single year. We've got some killer minisodes planned. We've got a book versus book that Kara and Kate just recorded, an Ice Cream Man Volume 8 that Nick and I recorded earlier today, an interview with a comic guest, and I'm not going to tell you who, but it's really cool. And we have a planned release of Patreon content because as I came back from my multiversal travels, I was looking at the Patreon and I said, there's too much. There's so many episodes of stuff on our Patreon. I have to do, a planned release of Pressure. So we're dropping the IRCB Movie Club #2 into the public feed at the end of July. It's where Paul, Brian, and I talked about Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It's one of my favorite movies, comic book movies at least. And I'm super excited for you all to hear it. So I'm going to be we're going to be taking the summer off. We're going to do a hangout in the middle of July. I'm calling it beach style. This is where I'm going to wear sunscreen. I'm going to sit indoors at my chair on my computer, pretend that I'm on the beach, and just have like rolling waves in the background, very much like the fan that I left on when we started recording. You're going to hear that in the background as well. So I'm super excited about that. Make sure to stay subscribed. If you're unsubscribed, don't unsubscribe. But anyways, let's get into things. I have two legally mandated questions that I have to ask, and I'm going crazy over here. It's how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Danny.
Mike, I've been very well. I'll talk about all that stuff in just a second. I did want to address something. Unfortunately, John Romita Sr. passed away. He's a legendary comic creator. If you read a Spider-Man comic, you've probably seen some of his work, like along, some of the older ones. And just over the past week, seeing not only creators but fans talk about him. I watched a few interviews that he did a few years ago, and listening to him talk about taking over Steve Ditko and what a monumental task that was for him, and how he was really in competition against himself, really, to make sure that he held up the quality of Spider-Man. It was really, really cool. So a very sad passing to a great creator, but I did want to talk about it because unfortunately he passed, I think, last week on Tuesday, maybe. So we had already recorded our show by then. So I wanted to talk about that. So yeah, go read an old Spider-Man book because they're really, really good.
They're wild. They're bonkers, but they're really good.
Yeah. As far as myself, so Mike, I also feel like I haven't been around forever, which is weird, but I think it's because a couple of weeks ago I was at a DreamHack convention, which is like a gaming convention here in Dallas. That was a lot of fun. And then last week I was off at Fan Expo Dallas. That's our biggest convention we have. And I feel like it just kind of recharged my comic book batteries going to a big show like that, like talking to creators, meeting other fans, seeing like friends that convention friends, people that you only see around the conventions. Like all that stuff kind of just recharge my batteries, and I'm so excited about I think I need to do this at least once a year to like get super pumped up about comics again.
Wait, go to a big convention or go to a video game convention that's not about comic books?
Well, maybe both.
Wondered.
Yeah, maybe both.
Okay.
It was a lot of walking, so that was also really good health wise. But yeah, I think going to a big convention, like I missed it so much. I mean, I don't get to go to a lot out of state, but we do have a few cool shows here locally. So that was really nice. Met creators from all over the world.
Nice.
So that was very cool. And now I'm really pumped to talk about comic books. And for some reason this week, I really leaned into my Captain America. I don't know. Okay. I don't know why.
Wearing the shirt.
You're
ready to talk about
this. Super Patreon.
Yeah. This was not planned. I figured I was like, I'm going to keep the shirt on now that I realized it. The first book I'm going to talk about is Captain America Cold War. This is a crossover between the Captain America Symbol of Truth and Sentinel of Liberty books. So both Captain Americas are coming together. Because the crossover finally finished, I was waiting for that to happen so I could get caught up. This one's written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly and Tochi Onyebuchi, with art by Carlo Magno, R.B. Silva, and Alina Erofiba, with letters by Joe Caramagna. So in what I love about this book is the nonsense premise of it. Uh, in this one, Bucky Barnes makes his deadliest move yet. The newest player in the nefarious game spanning all of civilization has teamed up with Sam Wilson's nemesis, the White Wolf. None of that makes sense to
What is
anyone
okay.
that's not reading these books.
Sure.
Isn't the White Wolf Bucky? Isn't Bucky with a White Wolf?
The movies would have me believe so, but it is in the comics.
The movies would have me believe so.
In the comics, it's a whole different character that's like an adopted brother to T'Challa. Who literally turns into a white wolf. This was a really cool reveal. Sorry if I spoil that for anyone.
I want to make clear for those of you just enjoying the audio experience here that when Danny started explaining the White Wolf, Mike literally started pulling his hair out. So,
I mean,
comics, everyone.
This is what you get to coming to the live show, okay?
The other incredible part of this is that also Steve's adopted son is in this book. I didn't even know Captain America had a kid.
What? Danny?
What?
Exactly.
Why are comics?
Ian Rogers, aka the Nomad.
Ian Rogers?
Yeah, Ian.
Steve named him after his grandfather.
Okay.
All right.
Fine.
Okay.
Sure.
So this book is a whole lot of nonsense. Dimension Z is like this other dimension that Zola invented. It's very weird stuff. None of that matters. What I really enjoyed about this book is just how they can. So you have two different groups of creators that are coming together. Normally these crossovers they'll feel very clunky because you're actually just taking like two different kind of scripts and wherever the ideas were going and trying to smash them together. Hopefully they fit. But I think the Captain America office at Marvel, like the whole team, I think they're working very well together. They really have both Steve and Sam running on like very nice parallel tracks that the stories very easily cross over. Also, the art is amazing for most of the issues. There was one issue that I was not like. The Alpha and Omega issues are done by a different artist that's not the usual artist from the books. It didn't click with me as much. I think a lot of the character designs are very different too. But other than that, this book was a lot of fun, and it's just a whole bunch of nonsense.
Crossovers usually are just buy both books.
Yeah,
plot,
exactly.
what plot?
Yeah. So this is nothing of like there's no Hydra in this. There's like none of the usual Captain America stuff, which was what I found really intriguing, and which is what led me to read the next thing I read, which is Captain America Volume 1 and 2, Castaway and Dimension Z. This is from the Rick Remender run from 2012. This is the part that explains how Steve got a kid, what Dimension Z is. So my buddy Jeff told me, you want to go read that if you just read this, because otherwise nothing makes sense. Now, I guess I read them in the wrong order, but...
I was going to say, aren't you supposed to read the backstory before the story?
Shouldn't you have read all of Captain America leading up to this in order to understand what happens in the latest volume, Danny? Come on.
I will say I was pretty surprised I didn't read this when it came out, because that's the era when I started reading comics.
Okay.
And then Remender was like my jam too. Like his stuff was either really violent or really edgy. And that was all me, like, fresh out of college, like, let's fuck up the world. So that really should have vibed with me. And I just kind of
comics are for adults now, so everyone can die.
I just realized I've never read a Captain America comic. I am pretty sure I have never read a Captain America comic. Just thinking about that, I was like, no, it's the guy from the movie. It's Chris Evans. That's fine. I don't need anything additional. But like, okay, so maybe this is what tell me a Captain America book to read, because I am pretty sure the only time I've seen Captain America in a comic book is that one panel from Civil War where his pecs are like enormous and like rolling out from his chest like a bag of potatoes or something. And it's just, that's what people
Well,
make fun of when they make fun of male physique in comic books. Like, it's just that one panel where it's just like,
yeah.
So,
Well, we've got 6 folks watching live on Twitch, so I'm wondering if you're all comic book fans, give us some recommendations for Kara, and
tell
I'll
me a
pass that
Captain
along.
America book.
Yeah, give us a Captain America book that Kara should definitely read.
Preferably one with lots of like tension with him and Bucky.
Yes.
Are there those? Or do
Tension.
I have to read fan fiction for that?
I will say, don't start here. This is
Okay.
a bad starting point.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with getting mad about the White Wolf. Like, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So just real quick to touch on some of the creative team, because it wasn't just Rick Remender. As amazing as
Okay.
he is, this has art by John Romita Jr. with an army of inkers: Klaus Johnson, Scott Hannem, Tom Palmer. Colors by Dean White. Letters by Joe Caramagna. Another thing I realized is that depending on who's inking John Romita Jr., his art vibes with me or it doesn't. So there are some
Interesting.
inkers like Klaus Johnson. I know I'm gonna love the issue, and I think Klaus
yeah.
Johnson's inks just make a lot of people better artists.
Yeah.
Or the art look better.
Frank Miller. Frank Miller.
Careful, we are on a public forum, Michael.
Come at me in the chat. I see nothing. I see nothing.
Wait, Danny, my parents are tuning in for this one. What's an inker? How does inking make a difference to art?
Hold on. We should ask our comic book extraordinaire who's on the show that question a little bit later in the show. How about that?
Okay. All right.
We'll save that one. We'll put that one in our back
Kevvo,
pocket.
I hope you don't mind explaining your entire process in maybe under 20 minutes. Is that okay?
Sure, no problem. That's how I do it anyway.
Oh, okay,
Great.
perfect.
Super fast.
But Danny, did you like this? You enjoyed it?
I did. I had a really good time because I read 10 issues of Captain America in a row. Like, this is
Okay.
2012 stuff. Like I said, it was really fun. It's nonsense, complete nonsense. Dimension Z is the worst. And then also, like, not all of the anchors that were playing along were my jam. So, like, some of the issues I was not super on board with the art. But I think because John Romita is drawing a lot of, like, big buff bodies and, like, monsters and Dimension Z nonsense, that stuff fits. I don't really like the way he draws small children.
Because yeah.
You can't do big buff bodies and tiny children accurately.
Yeah, no.
What about tiny buff children?
I don't know. The story never called for one of those, so maybe. But I think if you have to draw one of the two, and you can draw the big strong dudes, I think that works.
Like one of those medieval paintings where you're of like the Madonna and the Child, where you're just like, did this artist ever interact with a baby? Survey says no.
Yeah,
This is like nightmare fuel for me. Like, I already know how bad John Romita Jr. draws some things, and I can't imagine big buff children in any of his comics because I feel like it would just haunt me for years. So please, Frank Miller, don't ever ask him to do that. I know that's something you want him to do. Don't ask him to do that, please.
You get a little Steve Rogers in this one, and a little Ian Rogers. But it's cool. I really also like that they explore Steve as an artist in this one. Like, he actually, because he's stuck in this dimension for like a decade, he has to do something to pass the time. And one of the things that he's trying to teach his new son that he adopted was like that there's other cool things in the world and not just violence like they've been experiencing in this world. So he draws like this really cool mural. That was a really neat moment. And I was like, man, Remender, you really have some like interesting ideas that sometimes are kind of left unexplored in lieu of all the extreme action bullshit that I also love.
Are you telling me that we could have been having like the Captain America Spider-Man illustration power hour at Marvel? Like, just a book of them drawing and like tagging their way through Brooklyn and Queens. Let's go.
I think if Steve hadn't become Captain America, he would have become Bob Ross.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, that's beautiful, Danny. I love that. New headcanon.
That's nice.
So, but yeah, that's it. That's your Captain America report for the week.
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate that. Well, Kevvo, let's jump over to you. I realize that I totally skipped you at the beginning of this. I'm way out of my mind today, so apologies for that. But how are you? How have comic books been? Welcome back to the show. For maybe folks at home who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And because, if I'm not mistaken, you're somewhere in the Michigan area, could you give us a bit of a maybe not so West Michigan weather update?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for letting me come back. It's been a couple of years. I thought you lost my phone number, but it's nice to be invited back again.
Of course.
West Michigan Weather Watch. It is warming up, unfortunately. The weather has been great for the last week. It's been nice and cool, but the temperatures are going up, and I guess that's what you get in the summer. So the plus side, though, is that it's June and it's Pride Month, and it's been a lot of fun so far this month.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, I published my first book, and so this year I got to go to Pride festivals as a vendor for the first time, and it's
Nice.
been a kick.
Nice.
Yes, it's been so much fun. I went to Pride Festival the first weekend this month, and I've got another one coming up this Saturday. But it's so much fun to see people. I wasn't sure if graphic novels would fit at Pride, and I'm not sure why I was hesitant, because I feel like there is a large overlap between queer people and comic book lovers. And I found a lot of people at Pride who really were excited to talk about comics with me. So y'all need to set up a booth next year.
Yes,
Aw.
yes. We're gonna try. Who knows? But now that cons are becoming more of a thing, we definitely should.
My brain just made the connection that I'm sure thousands of people have made before, where you're saying, "Oh, queer people like comics. Who knew?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, let me shove my glasses up my nose. The superhero comic archetype in the United States is all about finding your true self and true identity in a world where you have to wear a mask." So, yeah, there's overlap, I would say.
I think you hit it
Yeah.
right on the nose. Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
Yes.
so because of all things Pride, and because I'm currently working on a book right now, I feel like I'm a little bit behind in reading. And as I mentioned before the show, I usually get my recommendations from IRCB. So the book that I
Oh.
read actually most recently is Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton. This book has been discussed before. So it's the story of a woman who has to pay off student loans. So she goes to work in the oil sands of rural Canada. And this is just the story of what she experienced. This book was recommended to me by a friend who doesn't read comics or graphic novels. Hi, Katie.
Oh.
And it was not at all what I expected. In the story, Kate tells stories in a way that seem real and present and very matter of fact. And I love the approach. There's very little judgment written into the story. That's really reserved for the reader. So for those who have read this, you'll know what I'm talking about. I found myself rolling my eyes a lot and gritting my teeth a lot at the things that she had to endure, the comments she had to endure, and things like this. It was a really hefty book. I thought I would finish it in less time than I did, but there's just so much to look at. She does really beautiful drawings, especially of the scenes of the towns in rural Canada that were just amazing. So yeah, I love this book. Just a content warning: there is sexual violence and depression in it, but I do recommend it.
Yeah, that book is deceptively dense. I feel
Yes.
like it is a big book, but if you know any of Kate's work, you know that she does a lot with the page. And this book in particular, it was so much unfolding, and every single chapter of the book, I had to read it in 2 or 3 sittings over a couple of days, just to digest it all. It's and
Yes.
it's definitely one of the best books I read this year, but it's also a very heavy book.
Yes, absolutely.
Given the subject matter. So yeah, but I'm glad you enjoyed it though.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, me too.
Well, I guess let's, Kara, what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for asking. I, right before this, saw the new Spider-Man movie. I don't even remember the title. What's that one? Is it Across the Spider-Verse?
Across.
I don't
Across the
know.
Spider-Verse?
It's across.
Thank you, Danny. I was like, the new Spider-Man. Everyone knows what the new Spider-Man is. 2 years from now, when somebody's listening to this, they'll know exactly what Spider-Man I'm talking about.
Yes.
All right. I rewatched Into the Spider-Verse last night in anticipation of seeing this movie. I was still unprepared. It's so good. It's so good. I went to see it with a friend, and it ended, and we just kind of just sat there. We were in the second row of the movie theater, by the way, in seats that reclined a little bit. So I was in the movie, y'all. I was in
Wow.
the Spider-Verse, and it just so many spiders. And I love it. I love these films because they really do feel like the full potential of a comic book film is being realized because they go so all out with the varying animation styles to match the different like universes that they're in. And I definitely
Mhm.
have some friends who are like casual Marvel watchers, but have started to be turned off by all the like multiverse stuff in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I want to be like, cool, same, but counterpoint, Spider-Verse. You should just watch the Spider-Verse movies because
You're
they
like,
do
"No,
it
no, no,
right.
wait, hold on. Like,
Mhm.
I know you're sick of the multiverse. I know it's hold on. You gotta hear me out with Spider-Verse. You gotta hear me out with this one.
Counterpoint, there's a T-Rex Spider-Man. Who wouldn't want to see that? That's comic books at its
Counterpoint,
finest.
someone went frame by frame in the trailer and found a popsicle Spider-Man that's chasing Miles at one point. So like anything's possible, okay?
Anything's
Anything's
possible.
possible in this movie.
It's great. It's wonderful. So that's my
Yeah.
big, like, you know, it's good, y'all. Please go see the Spider-Man movie. And I
Yes.
just like, I was really proud of myself for knowing who Ben Reilly was because I don't really read Spider-Man comics, but I knew who he was because I'm on the internet. The internet
Yeah.
is merciless and never forgets.
We are also very proud of you for that. Just so you know.
Mhm.
I also knew that Spider-Man 2099 was real, or like an actual like character from the comics, because
Oh,
that one I knew from it's been a hot minute since I've talked about this on the show, but in college I briefly had an under the table job at the local comic book shop sorting through their like slush bins in the basement. Like my
Paul is
job
over here salivating. He wished that he had that
my
job in
job
college.
was to go through all these long boxes of just miscellaneous comic books and sort them into an order that made sense. So I spent like a whole semester just like popping into the shop basement and creating a system of organization for all these comic books. And that was honestly one of the best comic book educations I've ever received. And part of that was just getting really, really familiar with like 90s Spider-Man titles because y'all, there are so many in the slush
Mhm.
bins at comic book shops around the US, I'm sure. So,
we could and should have a full episode on how to organize comics because
Oh.
everyone has their own way, and but coming from somebody that worked at a comic shop, probably that should be a more efficient way. I don't know, but I think that'd be really interesting to talk about.
This sounds like a 9-person round
yeah,
table, like
that's like
Hector
all of
Studio
us.
style thing. Like the whole cast shows up and just like
Yeah.
I can already hear the range of like Tia just being like throw it in the trash, it doesn't matter, to Nick's like if it came out, that's the order that it came out to. Paul's like I don't care, bag and board it, stack a million of them on top. I love it already. I love it already.
Let me
So,
call the Hollywood Reporter so they can get us one of those big tables.
Yeah, big. Yeah.
so I did read an actual comic book, and in a wonderful bit of, you know, when you are just lazy and you procrastinate, but you procrastinate long enough where your laziness becomes a profound pre-planning for a different thing. That's me on the show
Yeah.
today because
Okay.
because a few times back that I was on the show, I was telling you all about my latest Carl Barks duck comic acquisition from Fantagraphics,
Mhm.
the Golden Nugget Boat. And everyone said, "What on earth is a nugget boat?" And I am delighted to wrap up that storyline here because I didn't read it until this week, and I can now tell you what a nugget boat is.
Nice.
All right, so again, Carl Barks, one of the most famous and well-regarded comic illustrators of the 20th century, is the reason that you have DuckTales because he fleshed out the whole like Duckburg world in Disney Comics with Scrooge McDuck and Launchpad McQuack and all those other characters. And in this volume from Fantagraphics that I was reading, it's the Scrooge McDuck, the Golden Nugget Boat. And you're obviously wondering what a Golden Nugget Boat is.
Please.
There's
tell
a
me.
lot of backstory with Scrooge McDuck where he has created his wealth by prospecting in the Yukon at the turn of the last century. And they did some great jokes about his long lifespan in the most recent DuckTales reboot because they kept that canon. And you're like, wait a minute. that was over 100 years ago.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
still the same age. Okay. So
It's all explained by his magnetic mutation, so don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
So,
Perfect.
he goes back to the Yukon. He drags Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, the little duckling nephews, to the Yukon so that he can prove that he's not an old fogey, that he can still prospect with the best of them. And he ends up in a golden nugget seeking contest. He pays his way there by like breaking chunks off of this like little golden boat that's made out of a golden nugget. And I'm just like, man, that's a different time when you could just like travel around saying, here, take the mast off my golden boat as payment for this meal in this diner. What a life. What a wholesome way of living. Here,
Sure.
take my doubloons. Don't worry about it. So they get up to the Yukon. He enters a contest to prove that he's like still got it. He's gonna find the biggest golden nugget. And
Mhm.
you know, plot happens. He gets foiled. He actually gets foiled by cousin Gladstone Gander, who you'll recognize from DuckTales as just being one lucky duck. Just sails through life, swans through life, to make a pun, to just anything that Gladstone needs, he comes across. So he is also in this contest. And Scrooge is getting foiled until miraculously he finds the biggest nugget of them all. But how will he get it back to camp in time? Time to turn the nugget into a boat. A golden nugget boat.
Okay.
What?
Okay, Kara. Okay.
And he makes it look like a Nile cruiser with like a masthead and everything. And I'm like, we just established that this contest was ending like within a day. Are you telling me that you and Donald and 3 children made a boat out of this golden nugget and then sailed it down the river? Do we have a physicist on the line? Does a boat float if it's made of gold, even if like the center of it is airtight?
How heavy is gold? I'm
Well,
curious now.
I think it's too dense to float in water, if I'm not mistaken. That's why it sinks when they sift it. Anyways, I'm no
So,
gold
but if it's a
expert.
boat, would it float? So I'm delighted to return the conclusion of what is a golden nugget boat for Mike. Now you can get resolution on that one.
I desperately needed it.
I feel better about all the Dimension Z nonsense I just talked about after listening to the Golden Nugget stuff.
I have to say, there's some really good creative storytelling in this volume, though. My favorite story is like this one where Scrooge McDuck's like scientists have created a shrink ray, and they the Beagle Boys, the antagonists who are always trying to steal Scrooge's gold, take the shrink ray and try to shrink down his money bin so they can just like pop it in their pocket and steal it. But while fighting Scrooge to get at the money bin, they all get hit by the shrink ray, and then they get carried off by a troop of ants. And
Honey, I Shrunk the Ducks. Got it.
I Shrunk the Ducks. And just the scenes with the ants are really well illustrated. Like they're brought into this chamber where like the queen ant and all of her like ant courtiers are sitting around a table, like holding their leaves, and they all like look as one towards the entrance when the new prey are brought in because they're about to get eaten or whatever. And the boys have to use the shrink ray to like go in and throw chunks of sugar at the ants to distract them and get everyone out again. It's wild. And I was just like, this is why I love adventure comics, because weird shit like this happens and it's delightful. Like, let's do something creative and fun.
See, now I'm so mad that I didn't get my hands on any of those Ducks comics from when the Fantagraphics did their big sale, because I tried to buy a couple and they were all sold out.
Yeah,
so
they're all sold out all the time.
You probably got my copy. That's all I'm saying. I made the purchase and they had to go, oh, sorry, Mike, we ran out. So
they do reprint them all the time, though. They just do it in cycles. You'll have your moment. You'll have your own
I'll get
golden
there
nugget.
eventually. Maybe I'll go take this from the library or something. We'll see. But
I also didn't expect, after a whole week of listening to people talk about the Denver Nuggets, that we would talk more about that we would talk more about nuggets on the show.
More nuggets. Yeah.
I had chicken nuggets for dinner to really just further the theme.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well let's hold on. We're done talking about nuggets. Instead, we're going to talk about a different type of food. I read a cute little comic called Vesper Onion. I guess before I get into that, I should say I've been gone for 2 weeks. I've been doing all sorts of stuff, guys. I saw Quantumania and then had to immediately follow it up with Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh,
so my life was a series of lows and then a very high. I don't watch Quantumania. That's all I'm going to say. Just don't watch it. It's not good.
There's also ants in that one, though.
There is ants in that one. Damn it.
It all comes around.
Yeah, but yeah, I is weird. Zelda has been out, so I've just like every free moment that I have, I'm playing Zelda. But I did force myself to only play Zelda in the mornings during my fun employment that I'm in right now. And then I read comics in the afternoon, so it's a good, avoidance of things. For anyone who's worried, don't worry. I have another job coming. It's just starting later. But yeah, but I did sit down and I read a Kickstarter book that I got called Vesper Onion. This is by Vera Green Tea with art by Sarah Webb. It is capital C, capital U, capital T, capital E, cute. 16 pages of just absolutely adorable witchy comic books. It's a story about a witch for hire who people send her letters and they say, hey, I need this little spell made, or I need this little potion made. Can you get me the materials, or can you go get the materials and then make it and I'll pay you for that? Pretty cute little concept. I want to shout out Paul G on the IRCB Discord who recommended this, posted it in there, and I was like, heck yeah, let's check it out. Totally worth every penny. I'm just so frustrated at how short it is because it's got a very cute little simple story. And then at the end, I was like, okay, now I need the 300-page graphic novel about this witch and her cat, Onion. So Vesper is the witch, Onion is the cat, and the cat has magical powers. You guys, it's everything that makes these types of books really, really fun. It's got its little darker elements. It's got its light elements. Everything's really soft and nice. And it's like Witch Hat Atelier in a lot of ways. Like there is this darkness that exists partially, but also the world is very fluffy and light and cute. And I can't recommend this enough. If you get a chance to buy it, it's $16, or excuse me, it was 16 pages. I think it was like $10 for it, but like, it's very handcrafted, very DIY. It is really, really good, super wholesome, and I can't wait for more. Like I hit hard subscribe on the newsletter for this company because I just need the next installment. So very, very excited about whatever comes next with that book. Yeah. So let's talk more about how much I hated Quantumania, though, because I just have to get this out. No,
I mean, I haven't seen it yet. That was the first Marvel film where I was just like, I don't need to see it. And then I'm hearing, oh, but you have to see it to know what is happening with the Marvelverse. And I was like, but do I? Like, can't I just skip right to the Marvels, which is the one I'm actually interested in?
Here's the thing. It's like, I feel like they're going to do the same thing that they did with Doctor Strange, where like, they're like, you have to have watched WandaVision to understand this movie.
You
and
genuinely
then they
have
15.
Have
no,
to have
you do, except for
WandaVision.
they do a 15-minute like, oh, by the way, here's what happened on WandaVision in the middle of the movie in case you didn't watch it. I feel like the Quantumania stuff is like, I don't know, not selling, especially with all the business with what's his name who played Kang. Like, who knows what they're going to do? So the next movie that's going to involve that character, that the stepping stone was supposed to be Quantumania, they're just going to wipe it. I was joking about shitting on this movie, but I definitely still want to keep doing it if you guys want to do this.
I mean, I just feel bad for Paul Rudd because wasn't he supposed to be like the next Iron Man? And they keep being like, oh, well, we don't have Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans anymore, but we have Paul Rudd, and all his movies are like, I mean, they exist.
He can always go to Baskin Robbins and work there again. I also really find it funny that people are like, I know there's people that love the movies and they're like, no, you gotta watch this one, or you won't get it. I've been reading comics for over a decade. Trust me, I don't have to watch anything. I have jumped in the middle of weirder shit all along this track. So
Dimension Z,
exactly.
You just dove right into that, and it worked. Anyways, we don't have to do that all night. Kevvo, I am curious if you read another book that you want to talk about, so we don't have to talk about Ant-Man for the rest of the night.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So in honor of Pride Month, I also want to reference a book that I read. It's actually been a few weeks since I've read it, but it's a book that has just stuck with me. Genderqueer. I'm going to botch the name, by Maya Kobab. I'm not sure.
I think it's Kobabe.
Yeah.
Kobabe.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So that's another book that I heard about originally on this podcast. So I had to read it, and I read it, like I said, and I couldn't get it out of my head. It's personal and accessible and tells a story that we don't hear often enough. It's the story of the author's experience of figuring figuring out how E and your body fit in the world, even as E figures out how E fits in your own body. And the author uses ear pronouns. At this point in time, with the way that things are in this country and whatnot, I feel like more than ever, we need to hear more stories of the trans and non-binary experience. And so that's what this is. I've been recommending this book to all of my friends who I think are
Absolutely.
open to learning and different perspectives.
Yeah, this is one of like the most powerful books I read in a long time when I first got my hands on it, and the fact that it is, I think we had
Amy
Amy
Wright.
Wright on the show very recently, who was part of the American Library Association around graphic novels and comics,
Mm-hmm.
and she was talking about how this is like one of the most challenged and banned books in America right now
Yeah.
because it explores this thing that apparently American culture is so very scared of, for no reason other than it's seemingly unknown, or it's something that people are scared of for whatever reason. But
Right.
it is a very enlightening book. It's a book that, like, for me was like eye-opening to understand someone's experience beyond my own. Like, isn't
Yeah.
that what we read like fiction for, especially nonfiction?
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally love this, and I'm very like glad to hear that you loved it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I consider myself a pretty progressive person, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about sexuality and gender and things like this. And I still found this book to be so interesting, and I learned so much. Although I really think there's always just a benefit of seeing the world through somebody else's eyes and seeing somebody else's experience. And yeah, this book, it's one that really stuck with me. I'm somebody who can quite often read a book and forget what it was about 2 weeks later. And this is one that, yeah, is still sticking with me. So I love it.
Anybody that's listening or watching, if you want to go back, that's episode 373 with Amy. I love those type of episodes because we have Mike, we have Tia, and we have Paul, and plus the guest. Like, that's like the high end of like people that can talk about really smart stuff. Well,
I
Mike's
was gonna say
hosting.
that's like
Wow.
some
Yeah,
top
yeah.
tier academic literary.
Yeah.
I listen
But
to that to get smarter,
yeah,
etc.
And then Mike's
that's
there.
the
Yeah, I get you.
that's the Mike has to be there, but
Mike's
no,
our
but
everyman.
Right.
but that was the roster because I was proof listening to that episode and I was just like learning as I was proof
Yeah.
listening. So
Mhm.
go check it
Mhm.
out. Amy's great. I mean, this book, other books that are being challenged as well. Like it's a really wonderful conversation. So,
Mhm.
Kevin, I'm glad you
Yes.
enjoyed this book and I'm glad you brought it up because as we were talking backstage before we got on here, I think there's a few books that come up on the show a lot and it is because not only are they important to read, but I think it's just they've been impactful to all the people in IRCB. So we all kind of want to talk about them at different points when we
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
get to them, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's solid. Well, I guess let me talk about one more book. Or Danny, why don't you talk about one more book, and I got one more book too.
sure. So I want to talk about Night Fever from Image Comics, based on the Bee Gees song. No, I'm just kidding. It is not based on the Bee Gees hit song. This is another Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, Jacob Phillips joint. And that could be everything I say about this, and you would know that it's a good book. Like
Hmm.
it is really weird to talk about their books because, and even to review them, just because like, what can I tell you that you haven't already learned over the past, I don't know, however long they've been teaming up to do books together? Let me give you a
So,
quick synopsis. Yeah, go ahead, Kara.
well, I guess my question is because, like, I have read a bunch of Brubaker Phillips stuff. When you say Brubaker Phillips, I think noir murder mystery. But
Boom, you got it.
right, oh, okay. But I also think I never understand what those books are about. Like, I know it's a noir murder mystery, but every time I read them, I'm just like, this is a bock for Paul. This is over my head. Like, you know.
You know,
So where
it's
are we on this
interesting.
one, Danny?
no,
Yeah.
it's funny you say that because I as I was reading the book, I read the afterword at the back of the book, and Brubaker was talking about how they wanted to take a break. But for them, taking a break doesn't mean stop making comics. It just means to do a different book, right? So they
Yeah.
stopped doing the
Nerd.
Reckless series, which is their private detective type of story, and they're doing this. Let me tell you about the synopsis so you can see how this book is very different to like it is all those things you mentioned, but I think it's also more, which is what I really enjoyed about it.
Okay.
In Europe on a business trip, Jonathan Webb can't sleep. Instead, he finds himself wandering the night in a strange foreign city and with his new friend, the mysterious and violent Rainier, as his guide. Rainier shows Jonathan the hidden world of the night, a world without rules or limits, but when the fun turns dangerous, Jonathan may find himself trapped in the dark. And the question is, what will he do to get home?
So it's Fight
Uh,
Club.
it's Fight Club. It's
Okay.
what's the
Okay.
other movie with the people with the masks?
Eyes
Well,
Wide Shut.
Eyes
No.
Wide Shut. Yeah. It's a lot. So it's got a
Kinda.
lot of those little flavors. Uh, the best way I can recommend this is because I started reading this book, I couldn't put it down. I read it in
Yeah.
like 45 minutes.
Oh my
I
god.
couldn't stop turning the pages. It's really well paced too. You get these little chapter breaks. And I want to commend Jacob Phillips on this one. His use of colors to give you the tone and the ambient of this like European underground. It is amazing. It's not unlike stuff I haven't seen before, but it's just something that really stood out this time in one of their books. Like if you're doing a book with your dad, Sean Phillips and Brubaker, like you're in really good company. But the fact that I feel like he kind of outshone them for a little bit, like in this one, just really goes to recognize how great of a creator he is. And I can see why he has now his own, like, he's branching off and doing his own thing outside of just coloring books with his dad, which also really cool that you kind of get to work with your dad, like making comics
Yeah.
and doing something you're both passionate about. That's got to be really cool. But yeah, Mike, what did you think of this book? I know you've also read this.
Yeah, I sat down. I same exact thing. Like I was like, oh, I'll maybe like read half of this and then I'll go eat lunch and I'll come back. And I read it full forward. Right. It's different than Reckless in a lot of ways, and it's different from I think like Criminal. It's different from a lot of the other works that they've done together, like Kill or Be Killed, in that it feels like a nonstop story. Right. Like I feel like Kill or Be Killed, Reckless, all that stuff, they have chunks. And they kind of have this like beat after beat after beat pacing. Whereas this one was very much just like nonstop, ever flowing from beginning to end. And it's kind of like wound up in this nice little bow that kind of almost made me feel uncomfortable at the end. In that for everything that happens in the story, it should not end so nice and tidy.
Yeah.
Which like it almost kind of it makes you feel gross at the end of it. So I really liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. And it was an interesting departure from what they've been doing. Because like when they did a book like Fatale, I liked it, but it wasn't in my mind like their best work. It's a great story, but like overall, it kind of falls off at the end. This one had that same vibe, less supernatural, more like just like 70s like suspense thriller.
Yeah,
because it is a 70s movie. And I really like the way that Brubaker was able to like capture that feeling throughout the whole thing.
There's a lot of like is this really happening, or like a lot of unreliable narrator kind of stuff. Like Mike said at the end, like you could be like, did any of what I just read actually happen? Like it is having the reader question themselves while they're reading something like that. I think that's a very neat trick that you have to really stick the landing, or it's gonna feel cheesy or it's not gonna work. But this one worked.
I was gonna
very
say,
well.
I'm getting it was all a dream, and you're like, God damn it! But you're saying that wasn't the reaction.
That's the thing. You got to read it to really make that decision for yourself, because it feels like it could be that, but it also feels like it couldn't based off of some other things that happen. So yeah.
Think of the end of Inception as like whatever you want out of that. That's kind of what this book is. Not
it could be
unrelated to Inception in all other ways except that whole like how you feel at the end of that movie.
It has an ambiguous ending. How about that? We'll say that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Danny, I'm glad that you brought that up. I picked that up on Wednesday from the shop and immediately came home and read it. It was like, this is happening right now. And I know I'm a Reckless book behind. I didn't even read that latest one yet. So, yeah. Well, let me talk about one book really quick, and then we'll get into a top 4 pile, and we'll talk a little bit more to Kevvo about their Kickstarter for Z-Class Trix. I read Girl Juice by Benji Nate. This is a Drawn and Quarterly book that I picked up when I was in Canada, because I went to Canada. I went to the Drawn and Quarterly Librairie something in French that I can't remember the name of, but it was super cute. And it was basically...
Look at you, so fancy.
Yeah. It was fun. I was going to Montreal anyways. Kelly and we went on a little vacation up to Quebec City, and to Montreal. It was a lot of fun. And so we went into basically what felt like Williamsburg, but in Montreal, and that's where this library was. They had two bookstores that are like a couple blocks from each other, which I thought was funny. But one is like a bookstore for children's books, and the other is like their drawn and quarterly like full bookshop that has their stuff plus a bunch of other publishers stuff, which was pretty cool. But I picked up this book, Girl Juice. It's maybe is the funniest book that I've read all year. And I read Danger and Other Unknown Risks, which is probably one of the funniest books I've read in a very long time. This is the Ryan North and Erica Henderson book. Amazing. I also read a new installment of Megan Mogg. So like this book being almost the top contender, maybe the top contender for the year, pretty impressive if you're on, my side of things.
Sure.
But ultimately, this book is I'm going to give you a little piece of the synopsis. Welcome to Girl Juice House, home of the hottest gang in town. Benji Nate's stylish and rambunctious sense of humor lovingly takes digs at the young and tragically hip, reserved and introspective Nana, comically hypersexual Bunny, fledgling YouTuber Tula, and designated Mon trademark Sadie as they navigate life, love, and the pursuit of a good time. It's a very funny book, like I said. It mostly focuses on the character Bunny, who is like in the antics of being a girl boss with a U, who knows what she wants. She lives a very messy life full of strange escapades and sexcapades. She's very cool. She's too cool for her friends, but she also desperately wants them to love her because she really, really loves them. And all the lives of these four women in this house are pretty wild as they try to be independent people who are forced together by the crushing world of I simply can't afford to live by myself. I mean, this book doesn't really have that greater message or anything, but that's kind of like the implied idea.
Sure.
And the last chunk of this book is probably the funniest piece as they discover that their house is haunted. And so the YouTuber Tula, she is being haunted like on screen, and it's very funny as antics ensue. This is kind of like a strip comic style story where like some of the stories are 2 pages or 1 page or a couple of pages, and then the last chunk of the story is like a good 30 or 40 pages that kind of like rounds out the volume. Really, really funny though. If you're looking for like a book that's kind of going to make you laugh about like the modern day, like 20 something, this is the best book you could pick up this year. And I loved every single page of it. Once I started to realize that it was making fun of itself after a couple of pages, I was like, oh, this is the funniest thing I've ever read. So highly recommend Girl Juice if you get a chance. It's very funny. So
That sounds delightful. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, the art style is very simple. I think everybody will really like it. Benji Nate really gets like comedic timing, and it's such a simple, fun book. But yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about comic books that we're looking forward to reading. What's on the top of your pile, whether it's new or old or something else. Let's jump right into things with Danny.
Well, Mike, I was between two things, but then I read the notes, and I was like, well, Mike's got me covered. So on the top of my pile, and quick shout out to Nightwing 105. That's the book that's going to be all done from Dick Grayson's point of view. Make sure to go check that out. It's a really interesting experiment in comics. But I'll be reading The Hulk #1. We're getting a new Hulk series after the last Hulk series that just ended. So this one's going to be written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, who's also writing Action Comics. So I'm super, super invested in seeing what else they could do with another really strong buff character.
Wait. What?
So Philip Kennedy Johnson, just the past year, he took Superman to Warworld and pretty much made him Conan the Barbarian.
Okay.
And it is some of the best Superman that's not Superman that you've ever read.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think he's got a like. I feel like he's got a type.
Are we going back to Planet Hulk with this? Like, what?
Well, let me tell you.
Are we going back to Planet Hulk?
No, we're not.
Because I did read that comic book, and I don't know why.
Okay.
A side note: I love Planet Hulk. I will hear nothing else about that book. So, but this one has art by Nick Klein, who just finished a run on Thor, and colors by Matthew Wilson. This one has The Age of Monsters has begun as an enraged Hulk tries to take control of Bruce Banner's body permanently, and Mysterious Immortal turns every monster in the Marvel Universe against Banner in an attempt to free their creator, the primordial mother of horrors. I think we're going horror kaiju with this thing.
Okay.
And I'm here
how
for
does a
it.
kaiju sneak up on somebody?
Okay.
No one answered this
Wait.
question when I talked about Godzilla the movie, the one that had Aaron Taylor Johnson in it. At some point, all of these guys drop out of the sky. And it's the coolest scene ever, and they're like on the ground, like, "Where's Godzilla?" And Godzilla sneaks up on them. I don't understand it. There's no such thing as a horror kaiju movie because that would imply that kaiju can sneak up on you, and that's just not possible, Danny.
Because they're too
just
big.
not possible.
Is it because
they're too big? They're too loud. Come on.
Well, they can be very,
Just their
very
breathing,
sneaky.
just their breathing can shake mountains. I have to wonder if this book, this Hulk book, is going to, because like the whole Mother of Monsters thing, that's from Greek mythology. Like, are we going to go back to the Greek mythology origin story with this, or are we just lifting the template? That's what I want to know. I'm curious.
Is Incredible Hercules coming back? That's all I want to know.
I like all you. I love all the pitches. Keep them coming. Let's write our own Hulk. Marvel, if you're listening, we between everyone here, we can all write a Hulk book, and it'll be fun.
Right.
We can't draw it.
I have
Well,
read
Kevvo
3
can.
Hulk stories. I can now
Yeah.
write the Hulk. I read Hulk
Yeah.
Gray. That's all I need.
Yes.
I've read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I can write the Hulk.
Okay, I
but
did
yeah.
actually read that though. I did actually read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and that book is not the way the media would have it portrayed.
It's
It
not
is
the way
like
the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie portrays.
You're telling me
No.
that the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is not a 1-to-1 mapping of that book?
no, because you're not actually like seeing. You're reading the story from like a narrator who's like a neighbor guy, and is just like, "Huh, that doctor, he sure is weird." And then like after the fact, you find out what happens, and I was like, Robert Louis Stevenson, I expect better from you, sir. You know, you could tell why they made the changes that they did in later iterations.
He wanted to do Secret Window, but instead he did Jekyll and Hyde. So
Yeah.
uh,
So, Danny, you're excited for this Hulk book. I saw Philip Kennedy Johnson's name was attached, and I pre-ordered the first issue on Stupid Comicsology. So,
is that a
you think
different
this-
website?
Deep breath.
Yeah.
yeah, you think this has legs? That's what I'm wondering.
Oh, it's got big green legs, Mike. Big
Oh,
green legs.
Danny.
I regret asking the question.
No, you don't.
Okay.
That was great. That was delightful.
Oh boy. Well, Danny, you've convinced me regardless. If you think he did a good job on Action Comics, I'll have to compare notes with Paul, but I'll take your word for it. Anyways, Kevvo, what about you? What's on the top of your pile?
So I think I'm taking quite a tonal shift. I've got a stack of books that are waiting for me, and the top of my pile is a book called Left Turns by Joshua Ross. I got this book on Kickstarter. I guess it was earlier this year. So it's a 2023 book. It's a comic book artist who is newly single and evaluating what he's willing to sacrifice to pursue his dreams. I feel like it hits a little bit close to home, except that I'm not newly single. I'm just still single. And if you can't tell, I really like personal stories. So, yeah. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I don't think that there will be any Hulk smash in this, but I can certainly let you know.
You never know. You
do never know.
It's true. It's true.
No,
Because the Hulk can sneak. Yeah, the Hulk can sneak up on anyone too.
Oh my! All right,
Better than any kaiju.
You're not gonna like me when I'm angry. All right. Sorry. Well, Kevin, that sounds great. I was looking at the art on Kickstarter. It looks really cool. I do like in this Kickstarter the way that they're showing like previews is they're like flipping pages and stuff. That's a cool GIF. I hope somebody has a template for that because that would be really cool for other folks who maybe have a Kickstarter going like yourself. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in touch. Well, I follow him on Instagram, so I can certainly dig in and see what he can help me with.
Yeah, that would be cool.
For the future.
Well, I mean, you have to let us know what you think of this book. Next time we have you on, hopefully it'll be within a sooner date than what we had before. But
absolutely.
I guess, Kara, what about you? What's on the top of your pile?
I guess, Kara, what about you?
I
Thanks,
guess,
Mike.
Kara.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad you asked, Mike, because I have a book that's top of my pile, and I also have a request. I'm sending up the bat signal or the spider signal to get some ideas. Let me start with my top of my pile. I believe this has been discussed on the show before, but Kate Scotchless is reading Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow and posting art in our IRCB group chat.
Mm-hmm.
And I had not heard of this book. I think, Danny, you were talking about this book at one point, and it's just, I have been like totally ignoring superhero comics for a while. Like, aside from reading whatever X trash Mike tells me to read, I'm not really reading superhero comics right now, just because sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you need to read like a million comic books about ducks that are really people that are ducks. But I want to read this book because, first of all, my name is Kara, so I feel somewhat obligated to read some Supergirl books sometimes because we share a name. Got to support the other Karas.
Why did I never
course.
put that together?
Danny!
Oh my
Hello?
god!
Oh my god!
Danny, we're gonna have a talk about your performance here on IRCB after the show today. Oh my gosh.
I'm telling you, it's all this garbage comics. They just rot in my brain.
Oh my god. It was such a delight as a teenager to realize that there was a superhero that shared a name with me who was also blonde and blue-eyed. And what a shocker. A superhero comic character who's white and blonde and blue-eyed. But here we are. So
you don't see many of those. No.
Don't see many of those at all.
No. You don't see many of those.
All right, so it's been a hot minute since I've read a comic that is of the superhero genre, but the art does look fantastic. The colors look really rich and saturated, and almost like, I almost just said what Fiona Apple is doing on Saga, what Fiona Staples is doing on Saga. You know, tonal richness from both artists. But I really feel obligated to read it because I started shit-talking Comet the Talking Horse in the group chat. And for those listeners who are not familiar, Comet is Supergirl's horse because, like all good comic books or characters created for a female audience by men who think they know what women want, sometimes they're right, and the answer is horses. That is what we want. The true horse girl will always choose the horse. So,
okay.
So once upon a time, Supergirl had a horse that was like her super friend, her super buddy, but the horse could like think. You could see the little like thinking speech bubble. And turns out that Comet the super horse was really a centaur who wanted to become a man, but in ancient Greece, the sorceress Circe gave him the wrong potion, so he was turned into a full horse, but he's immortal and sentient, and also kind of in love with Supergirl, who is a teenager. Okay. Although, as Paul pointed out, technically she's older than Superman because she was cryogenically frozen on the way from Krypton to Earth. So, okay. Ew, first of all. Second of all, goddamn it, comic books. But anyway, so Comet is in this book. No word on if Comet is also a sentient centaur turned horse who's also immortal, but I guess I'll have to find out for myself. And then my bat signal / spider signal to the world is, since I just saw this Spider-Verse film and realized that I also tend to not read Spider-Man comics, my question is, what Spider-Man comics should I read? I'm taking requests. I will try new things. I promise. Maybe not the Ben Reilly stuff, but I'll read other spiders.
Yeah. Anything but Ben Reilly. I gotcha. Well, please send us an email, ircbpodcast@gmail.com, if you've got any Captain America recommendations. I mean, right away, Winter Soldier comes to mind. I don't know why I didn't think of that earlier, but you got to read that one, Kara.
Okay.
And as far as Spider-Man stuff is concerned, send us an email, probably some Miles Morales stuff if you have any good recommendations. I'm thinking that the Saladin Ahmed run is pretty good, but maybe we'll see what the listeners have to say.
Sure.
Email us at ircbpodcast@gmail.com. You know?
Yes, please.
I guess let me talk about a book that's on the top of my pile, and then we might have to take a quick break. We have some slight technical difficulties, but we'll get through this bit, and then we'll see what happens. But shout outs to Matt, who's hanging out with us on
or Discord.
On Discord, I guess not on Discord, on Twitch and stuff today. He had a pick that is Wild's End #1, which is the new Dan Abnett book, which is continuing the Wild's End series, which I thought was just done forever. So that's super exciting. So Matt, let us know what you think of that. But for me this week, I pulled from Danny's pick because I figured there's nothing else that's coming out outside of like Time Before Time that I really want to read. And that is Ultimate Invasion #1. This is Jonathan Hickman. on writing, pencils by Brian Hitch, inks by Andrew Curry, colors by Alex Sinclair, letters by Joe Caramagna. I mean, I'm a sucker for all this stupid shit. Like, quite honestly, Ultimate Universe was like the thing that I was like, I'm going to read every single Ultimates book. And then I did until Ultimatum, and I said, I'm never reading Ultimates ever again. And that's how it went. So, I really did love all the stuff that Mark Millar did, Hickman did, Warren Ellis, despite all of these people's potential problems, even the Robert Kirkman stuff, even the wacky, wild X-Men stuff that he did. I really loved all of it. I read as much of it as I possibly could. And to see that Hickman and Brian Hitch are coming back to do some Ultimate stuff, or whatever this Ultimates invasion is, he's going to bring back super evil Reed Richards, which I always find to be a fun concept. Everybody's got a helmet in the Hickman universe, and guess what? If you look at this cover, Brian Hitch drew a helmet on at least Reed Richards and probably a bunch of other people. So I'm obsessed with this in terms of trying it out. It's $9 for the first issue, so I might as well just stab myself in the eye to read this comic book. But regardless, like, this is going to get me because I was 19 when I read this, and I'm feeling super nostalgic. And Hickman, he's a pretty good writer. I've liked what he's done in the past, so we're going to see if he can, knock another one out of the park. So I'm excited. Danny, what about you? I know this was on your list too.
Yeah. So I will say, unlike Mike, by the time I started reading comics and got to that, and I had some extra time to actually get to the Ultimate stuff, Hickman was about to destroy it, and I'm like, well, I mean, maybe I don't need to anymore, right? Because we're leading all these Secret Wars. So I'm excited for this because I know the few characters that remain from the Ultimate Universe that are now folded into regular continuity. They're very cool. I know there's a lot of really cool creators. I know they took it to an extreme at some point. I've heard horror stories of some of those Ultimate books, but I've also heard like people like Mike that they really just enjoyed a lot of that era. So I'm very excited for that. I think Brian Hitch on superheroes is where he truly shines, like in a big book, bombastic book like this.
Totally.
And Jonathan Hickman, I love when he comes in for a concept and just kind of sets it up and leaves it there for everyone else to kind of play with. See Hoxpox and all the stuff that's happening in Krakoa as an example. So why not? I'll also spend $9 on it, but
unbelievable price for a comic book.
How many pages?
53 pages.
53?
No, it's 53 pages. Marvel has a shotgun to all of our backs, and they're saying, this is it. This is what's happening. It's not fun.
Let me go check out the variants because I may end up spending
Danny,
more than
$8.
No.
Danny,
wait,
please.
I have a comment about Jonathan Hickman because I actually could not tell you what his style is as a writer, but his name is everywhere. So to me, he's like the workhorse of superhero comic books. Like if Hickman's on a book, it will be fine, but I won't remember it necessarily.
I mean, I think he if you want a peak definition of what Hickman's style is, I would read his Secret Warriors run that he ever did. His whole thing is gears within gears within gears, which is literally the title of the last arc. I think it's called Gears Within Gears because his whole thing is like there is a small story that's happening that is inside of a bigger story that's happening that is inside of a bigger arc that's happening. And now every writer should be doing this, but Hickman likes to set up like these multi-chain things where like by the time you get to the end of the story, you see that the reason why you got there is because multiple things happened in succession in a way that is really unique. And the way that I'm describing this, it sounds like storytelling in general. So maybe he's not unique at all.
Well, I don't know, because superhero comics tend to just kind of either peter off or go and fade into the abyss, and I don't know, like sometimes they don't have things resolved. So if you're saying that Hickman resolves things in smaller arcs, that sounds satisfying. That tracks with my impression of him as like a workhorse writer. And I don't mean workhorse to be like derogatory. I mean like you're a perfectly functional writer who, like, as you said, like this is writing 101. Congratulations, you closed your story. You came to a conclusion. That's great. And for superhero comics, that's incredible.
I like to think of Hickman as like an engineer. He loves building these complex machines and just kind of leaving them out there to run. The problem is that sometimes he's not there for the maintenance. And then that's when the wheels can kind of come off. Because not everybody that follows his stuff can take his ideas. Now, Mark Waid, I would call him a workhorse, where he just kind of comes in and does all these titles and just like yeah, whatever. I can write 10 DC books. It doesn't matter. I know
Yeah.
all this stuff is in my head. So that's really interesting about how different their styles are. But I mean, they're both two of the people that these companies love to bring them back and have them
Mm-hmm.
just play around in their sandbox.
I really
Yeah.
love, Danny, that you just described the deist philosophy of God made the world and then just left it alone to describe Jonathan Hickman in the Marvel universe. You're just...
I mean, it's not far.
He did write a book called God is Dead. So like
All right, he's proving the point.
If anyone thinks if anyone thinks highly of Hickman, it's definitely Jonathan Hickman. So
yeah. Cool. Well, Danny, we'll have to converse about this after this book comes out. We'll see what happens, because I'm pretty sure I'm actually going to put this on the top of my pile and read it as soon as it comes out, because I'm really curious to know if this is even going to vibe with me at all. Right? Like, it's been so long since I really read any Ultimate books. The pitch for this made it seem like, hey, we're bringing the Ultimates back the way that they were, which like shouldn't make me excited, because that's the reason why comics are the way that they are in the big two, is because they keep saying, guess what, guys, we're bringing it back to the way that it was, and that's actually not good.
But Mike, now you're the target demographic. Now you're the target demographic. You are the correct age for being marketed to. I went into a taco shop this weekend, and this taco shop was like my personal paradise, because it was all this like 90s nerd toys everywhere, and they were playing Rocket Power on the TV, and I was like, okay, this is for me. I have expendable income, and you understand that I'm at the height of my purchasing powers.
Yeah.
This is why this exists. I understand. That's you. And I was thinking, like, it's at the top of your pile. It's at the top of your pile because it's $9. You want to see if your investment is worth it.
That is exactly true. On the bright side, it is a 4-issue miniseries, and the subsequent issues are only $6 each at probably 32 pages, because Marvel can get away with anything that they want, and we let them every month. But yeah, we'll see. If anything, I'll probably just wait for this to hit Marvel Unlimited and just read it. Maybe that's what they're hoping people do. So yeah, but I guess we're gonna do a little timeout here, I guess, in the show. Kevvo, we're back. You're back. I know you dropped off there for a second. Is everything all right?
So I'm fine.
Okay, good. Well, I guess then let's just jump right into things. So right now you have a Kickstarter running for a continuation of the series that we talked about way back in 2021, Z-Class: The Beginnings. You have this new book called Z-Class Trix. Could you tell the folks at home a little bit about where you're at with this book?
Yeah, well, let me try. I feel like I talk about this book all the time, and I still don't have a succinct story.
Sure.
Z-Class is a YA superhero graphic novel series. So I grew up loving the X-Men, and that's what sort of informed the idea of having these kids who are born with these super abilities. And Trix is just the continuation of the first story. The first book, The Beginning, which came out last year, Z-Class: The Beginning, was sort of the introduction to all of the characters and sort of showed how the team came together. And then Trix picks up where that left off. We're introducing some new characters. There were some cliffhangers that the first book ended off on. And we've got some longer, what I'm super excited about, what's keeping me going with this is there are some longer stories that I'm really excited to tell, and we're starting to dig into that. The first book, I spent a lot of energy in just trying to introduce characters, and it was hard to tell much story at the same time. And now with this book, we're able to start actually digging into the story. And that's what's exciting to me about it.
Yeah, and it's a cool looking book. I will say, read the first volume. There's a wonderful shout out to the podcast in there that I really appreciate you doing. There's a chapter where one of the characters is wearing an IRCB shirt, which is really, really cool for me to share around with the group that I was sending around earlier this week.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
but yeah, no, the comic's really fun though. It's about like a bunch of a ragtag group of kids who come together to try to be superheroes, and there's maybe a couple of twists and turns in there. As we see this story go on, I mean, like, I feel like in the first volume, everyone was able to kind of establish their powers and stuff, and they kind of came together as a team. And then the book ended. What kind of hijinks could we expect these kids to get up to in this next volume?
So in the next volume, so it actually picks up only a couple of weeks after the first one. At this rate, I don't know how long it's going to take me to tell this story. If it takes, like, every book only goes forward about 2 weeks.
Sure.
But so this book we're picking up shortly after the first one ended. Kids are starting to go missing around town, even as other kids are starting to show up with new abilities. And so our team is trying to figure out if those things are related. We have new characters that are going to be joining the scene, and we'll just have to stick around to figure out whether or not they're working with our team or against our team. And even within our team, so one of the things that I really loved about X-Men, that I still love about X-Men, is not the superhero part, but the personal part, the relationships, the drama, things like that. And that's something that I'm really excited to dig into with these books. One of the things that was really important to me about putting Z-Class together was the idea of representation. I think that is kind of reflected in some of the books that I have been reading, that I chose to read and talk about today. It's really important to me that readers are able to see perspectives that are not necessarily their own, and that's something that I'm trying to do in these books, especially for a YA audience. And that's something that it's the personal stuff, the relationship stuff, the characters themselves that we're really going to start digging into more in the new book and the books that are to come. So yes, there is a mystery that's happening in town, and kids are going missing, and kids are showing up with abilities and all of this stuff. But within the team, the kids themselves are experiencing some changes of their own, and I'm really excited to tell these stories.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I'm excited to read the next volume of this, if only because, like, I was a big fan of the first one, and it's really fun to read a book that is exciting for me as an adult to read, that I definitely could hand to, like, a 9-year-old kid, and they probably could have a good time reading it as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, what I really appreciated about the first volume is, like, you're not scared to broach some what I think are slightly tougher subjects, well,
Yeah.
without which is interesting, because I feel like some writers may shy away from that because the little kids or younger readers aren't necessarily ready. But I feel like the way you approach it, a lot of the topics in the first volume, it didn't feel blunted, but it also didn't feel like it was going to, like, hurt anyone's mind, at
Yeah.
the same time.
So I appreciate you saying that. It's funny that you say that, because when I was promoting the first book, I was really trying to push it as a diverse, potentially queer cast of characters. And then the feedback that I got from one of my friends after reading it, he was like, this book just wasn't as gay as I was expecting it to be. And I think a friend of mine pointed out, I think you see in it what you're looking for in it. And so what I told him is that it's actually a very queer book, but you don't necessarily know it when the first one is done. You have to read a little bit more and find out where these characters are and who they are and things like this to really realize where they were when the whole thing started. And I feel like I'm
Sure.
speaking really cryptically right now, but I think part of the intention behind that too is I want so as a queer person myself, being queer is not the biggest thing about me or the only thing about me. There's so much more to me. And that's what I want for these characters too. I want readers to love these characters for the multifacetedness of them. And then if they find out that they happen to also be queer, at this point, hopefully people are already loving these characters, and that's not really going to be an issue.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, for other kids who might be queer, and I'm using queer as an example, there's diversity in age and body size, body types, races, things like this. But for kids who are queer, I think that they might be reading this book and already recognizing things in these characters that maybe reflect some of their own experiences. And I like the challenge of that, the complexity of that, the subterfuge of that. That's what I'm trying to do with these books. So we were talking earlier about how genderqueer is one of those books that's so banned everywhere. I want Z-Class to be one of those books that is banned everywhere. So that's something that I'm rooting for. I don't know what it'll take, but that's my aim.
That's a lofty goal, but I applaud it. That's
Thanks.
please ban my book.
Well, I feel like all the best books are getting banned, so I
Right,
would be in great
exactly.
company.
It's so funny to think like, oh man, somebody out there is curating a really solid list of books that you should read.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So
Um, Kevvo, I do want to mention, I really like your character designs, like the outfits. Just like you mentioned, there's a big, wide cast of different, body types, and just like all the
yeah,
characters look very unique. And I
thank
think
you.
that's something that for young readers, one of the, all these little identifiers are very
Hmm.
important for them to latch on to a different character, right? There's a
Hmm.
reason why everyone has a different turtle that they love, is because they kind of identify with their favorite color or whatever the case may be,
Yeah,
you know.
yes,
And this is very similar in your own style. um I love the outfit with the collar. That's just like immediately something that jumped out at me as I'm kind of
yes,
going through the Kickstarter page. So I
yes.
hope
Thank
that
you.
anybody that picks this book up and reads it can find their own little favorite character, because I
Yeah.
think that that's part of the fun in comic books.
Absolutely. And it's funny too because kids. So one of the things that this having this book has afforded me is the opportunity to go in and speak to groups of kids. And one of the questions that kids will come to me at. So first, it was super exciting to find out that kids in these classes that I'm talking to have read my book, which is
Oh,
just such a high.
So
And
cool.
to hear their ideas about the characters and wanting to know what's going to happen in the next book. Is so and so going to have powers, or things like this, which I don't give any spoilers of these things. But one of the questions that kids will very often throw at me is, who's your favorite character out of this? And sort of to your point, it changes. When I first started writing the first book, it was all about Justin. And then as I was meeting the characters, Eleanor is actually based on a friend of mine. And so Eleanor sort of became a favorite of mine. But then I wrote that first chapter about Anjali, and it really became her story for me. And so it's just been a really evolving process. My favorite character depends on the day of the week. The character you're referencing is Heather, and that is a character that I actually created when I was in high school. And she has sort of been pulled forward and de-aged for the purposes of this book. Um, and yeah, you're exactly right. My hope is that people will just find a character that resonates with them. And I'm really excited actually to introduce the new characters that are coming too, because I think it just will continue to expand the diversity of the representation within the book. But just yeah, the complexity of the stories, all of that stuff.
Totally.
Kevin, I want to build on what you were just talking about and kind of hark back to something Mike mentioned earlier. Can you, like, now knowing that one of your characters was created when you were in high school and modified for this story, can you tell us a little bit about your creative process and what is inking? Just like
So I have a whole slideshow that I take to schools and talk to students about, with the entire process broken down
amazing.
succinctly for the purposes of the books. So one of the challenges that I've discovered is wearing all the hats yourself. It is a lot of work to make a graphic novel. I have never considered myself a writer, and yet people have to remind me that technically I've published a book that I've written, so I am a writer. That's the first step. Writing is potentially the most challenging part of the process for me, and some of the most fun of the part of the process for me. When I was picking up writing Trix after 2 years, it'd been 2 years since I'd written the first book, and then I started writing Trix. It was like revisiting old friends, and it was so much fun. Like, where's our story going to go now? And it was exciting to see where the story's going to go. And I don't always know where the story's going to go. The characters, I have some long-term stories that are already in my mind, and the characters themselves sort of propel the story in their own direction as well. Following that, I do all of this work digitally, but the language for it harkens back to the old days when everything was done with traditional media. Following doing the writing, I do the pencils, which is just doing the sketches. On top of that, I do the inks, and that's doing the formal lines that will actually be used for the book itself. Following that, I do the coloring, and then the lettering, and I feel like that's that's the very short version of all of the steps that go into putting the book together. One of the questions that is commonly asked of me is, how long does it take to do the book? And I don't remember exactly how the math worked out, but I figured it out that it takes about 4 hours per page
Oof.
for me to illustrate the book. So the first book took me, or the first book was 256 pages, I think. So I'll let you figure out how long it took me to do that. And I had to
Wow.
redraw the first 2 chapters. So I know, I know. Don't get me started. I'm not redrawing anything in this book. It's going to be what it's going to be. But yeah. So, and then as far as Heather was a character that I came up with back when I was drawing superheroes in high school. A very complicated, complex story that she had. She was the 3rd generation of superheroes with this particular ability, and I brought her up to Z class. Kept some of that. So in the first book, you find out that her mother also has abilities, but then changed a whole lot of it too. And she's a character that I'm really excited to share the story of. In the coming books. I don't know if that answered your question or very succinctly, but
No, it was great insight. I have a nerd follow up. How did you choose your color palette? I'm trying to get
oh
more.
my gosh! If I
All right, let's do this.
I
We're
have said
getting
this.
into it.
I have said this to so many people. If I had the budget, the first thing I would do is hire a colorist. I feel like I used to teach color theory, and I feel like coloring these books is the most challenging part for me, mostly because it just takes so stinking long. As far as the color palette, Heather's abilities are related to cold and ice, so it seemed obvious to me to go with blue. I really liked the idea of having each character with a distinct color that went with them. Anjali has Indian heritage, and when I was looking at traditional costumes, outfits that would have been worn in India, I was finding a lot of reds for characters like her. I'm trying to think. Eleanor somehow became green. I don't know. So eventually, they each got assigned their colors, and they've sort of been pulled forward. But truly, if I found somebody who I could just hire to do all the coloring for me, I would do it in a heartbeat. I see the work that other people do in these books, that the color work that is just so amazing to me, and I'm like, oh, if only, maybe one day. But
Now, Kevvo, I also want to ask. So it looks like in the first book, I believe you did the cover. Is that correct?
yes, that is correct.
Now, how is it to see somebody else? Because I see that the cover is by Jan Bautista.
Yes.
In this second iteration, how does it feel to see the characters that you created interpreted by a different artist? What is that
Oh my
like?
gosh, that is my favorite. So when I did the first book, I had the fortune of finding beta readers. And so what I would do with the beta readers is give them one chapter of the book, give them 2 weeks to read it, a little worksheet to fill out with just sort of prompts for things, areas of improvement, things that were really strong and whatnot. And then we did a Zoom call together, all of us, for about a half an hour, just to sort of process through if there were things that I had questions about or whatnot. And having a Zoom chat where people who I am not related to, some of them I'd never even met before, were talking about my characters and what they were finding relationship-wise in my characters and whatnot. That was just a high that I could not, I wish I could bottle it. It was amazing. And now having other people draw my stuff. So on the current Kickstarter, I have game stretch goals. That game stretches. I don't know.
Stretch
The
goals.
language is
Gotcha.
very clumsy for me right now. But one of the goals is to get fan art from people. And so at this point in time, I'm not really sure we're going to get enough fan art pieces to make that goal happen. But I have started getting some fan art, and it's so much fun to see people's interpretation of my characters. I love it, because this is what I was doing. Like when I was a kid, I was drawing other people's characters, and I knew how exciting that was for me, how much fun that was for me. And so to see other people doing this, when I do the Pride booths, one of the things that I have just as a free giveaway is coloring pages. when I released the first book, I had a book release party here in West Michigan. Kate Lamphere was actually at that party, and one of the things that I had at the party were these coloring pages of the characters, and it was just so much fun. People coloring my characters and changing my characters with crayons, and all the things that come along with that was such a kick. And so it was a no-brainer for me to have somebody else draw the cover for this book. And as a matter of fact, it's sort of something that I'm thinking about, like, who can I get next time? Like, I want to have maybe a different artist do every cover for a while. And I just think that's going to be so much fun. I had very few requirements to the process, like this hair color has to be this and whatnot. But otherwise, it was just so much fun to see how she interpreted it. And I want to do it again. So if you're offering, if you want to draw the characters, bring it. Like, I welcome it.
I might send some fan art, but I don't know about the whole cover.
Right. Well, I make no guarantees about where it might end up. So please go ahead and send it.
I want to go back to you were saying that the X-Men were an influence, which kind of stole the lead of one of my questions for you, which is there's a grand history of teens banding together and being in a little group from superheroes to Scooby-Doo. So what were your influences? But the next step of that is, I guess, then knowing that it's the X-Men, if you could mix and match the characters of Z-Class with the X-Men, what characters would we mix and match with? Who's going over to Xavier's Academy? Who's
right.
over?
Goodness. Okay. Wow, that's a question I haven't been asked before.
Are you de-aging?
Okay. So I think the no-brainer for me would be mix and matching with New Mutants, because we've got kids, like we've got characters that are already kid age. I'm not going to go into too many spoiler details, but I will say that there is a trajectory for Anjali that would make sense to move in an X-Men direction that I can already see in her future. I don't know how they would do with Xavier, because I'm not really sure that they. Yeah, I don't know that they would work well with him. But
I don't think anybody's ready to deal with Xavier, if we're being really honest. But
fair point. Yes, but that is something that actually I see. I'm on Reddit, and I am part of these comic creating groups and whatnot, and I see people posting regularly about this desire to work with other comic creators to create sort of a universe. And in theory, I think it's amazing. I love the idea. And I also think, like, how much fun would it be for my characters to do a crossover with Marvel Mutants, things like that. I think my kids would have so much fun on Krakoa. I think it would be such a kick. There is, in the Chris Claremont tradition, there is a extensive backstory that has not been fully revealed in the books yet. But I think that it would line up really nicely with some of the challenging history of X-Men as well. We've got our own little Dark Phoenix saga going on over in Hamilton Falls. But I won't say more than that.
Exciting. Well, everybody's got to get back this Kickstarter so you too can see what this potential huge blow up may be, is what it sounds like to me.
It's true. It's so funny too, because as we're having this conversation, the Kickstarter is actually at 98%. So, like, we're gonna get there. It's no problem.
Close.
I know, so close. And I had a dream last night that I would be on this podcast and live. I would get to 100%, so we would be able to make an announcement live. It didn't happen, but that's totally fine. It's Sunday.
We've got five people on the Twitch stream. They all could hit that top tier.
Exactly. Yes.
I have been refreshing the page, Kevvo, just to check.
Danny's making sure.
My phone is sitting right beside me and like prompts are right here. So as soon as that happens, I will be interrupting this podcast to make a very important announcement.
It's a 4-hour long episode to see this through to the end.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have we'll have a telethon. Who's our next step that can come on and perform for a half an hour?
Hold on, let me call Nick really quick. We get Paul. We'll do a 9-person roundtable right now.
I was thinking Tony, Orlando, and Dawn, but that works too.
Oh, that works too. Yeah. Well, I guess let's get into some final questions so we could actually wrap this episode up. Though, Kara, I'm going to steal right from your list here. I am curious. Born and raised in Michigan, now I live out in big old New Jersey. What's the comic scene like in Michigan right now? I guess you've obviously been slowly working into the circuit. How have things been? Are there any other folks you're working around with or anything like that?
Oh my gosh. So I wish that I had a better answer for you. So really long story made short, I lost my social media last fall. It was super frustrating because it happened too, sorry, I just got notification that we got some support on the Kickstarter.
I may or may not have backed the goal that I wanted. So
Danny,
thank you. That's amazing. So back to your question. So I lost my social media 2 weeks before the first book dropped. And in that process, I also lost all of the contacts that I had made previously. So I'm in the process of rebuilding that right now. And it's really exciting, actually, and fun to find local artists who are creating. Unfortunately, I don't know enough yet. One of the things that we had talked about before the show started is that I have wanted to do comic conventions, and I sort of set the personal rule for myself that I wasn't going to do a convention until I had at least 2 books in hand. And so after this year, I will have 2 books in hand. So I will feel more prepared to do a comic book convention. And so much like Pride festivals, I imagine I'll probably start with the littler conventions and sort of get my feet wet and see what I'm up for. But I'm really looking forward to rubbing elbows with a lot of the creatives around here. I have a friend who actually is not currently creating, but wants to be in Detroit. And so I'm just constantly prodding him, like, as soon as you're ready to start creating, I'm ready to do a booth with you, and let's make this happen. But yeah, otherwise, I'm not going to answer your question very well, so that will hopefully cause you to want to bring me back at another time, and we can talk about the local creators in Michigan.
I'd love to do that. We could get some Michigan residents on here too, so that you guys can talk shop, I guess, or something.
That would be amazing. Yes, absolutely. Bring it.
Cool. Well, I guess Danny, Kara, any last questions here before we wrap up the show?
Ooh.
Yes.
As you know, we love our snacks here. What are your must-have snacks when you're creating or otherwise?
Oh my gosh. So before we had this podcast, I ate some cherries, but when I give you that as the answer, it sounds like I eat much healthier than I really do. That's just because that's what I happen to have in the refrigerator at the moment.
I also had cherries today because they were in my refrigerator, and I was like, I should eat some of these, right?
Exactly.
Instead of the Skittles, right?
It seems like the responsible decision. So I don't necessarily. Oh, I do have a go-to. I was going to say that I didn't. So Skittles are not my jam. The fruity candies are not my thing. I like the chocolate candies, and I didn't have an answer until you reminded me. So at Costco, they sell these caramels, these chocolate-covered sea salted caramels that are so delicious. I was introduced to those by my best friend about 2 years ago. First time I had them, I asked how many would be inappropriate to eat the first time, like in one sitting. We decided that 3 is probably the healthy threshold for that. And so I pretty much always have those in my cupboard. And then currently, like most people, when their bananas go bad, they make banana bread. I make banana brownies. And so I've got banana brownies in my fridge right now that are pretty delicious.
Nice.
So,
you describing the sea salt chocolate covered caramels. I was like, but the Trader Joe's dark chocolate peanut butter cups, those things are dangerous.
So
let me tell you.
I get those in my stocking every year from the same best friend that I mentioned earlier. So yes. And I do have 2 of those in my pantry as well. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm almost thinking I should not invite you over at any point because I don't. Yeah, I feel like to protect my sweets, we might just have to meet at neutral ground.
Bring your own snacks, please.
We know you have
true,
the good
it's
stuff
true.
now. You got the good stash.
It's true, exactly. You can keep your Skittles, and I'll have my chocolates over here. And yes.
Danny, last question. Otherwise, we could wrap up here, I think.
No, I'm just very excited now to get to to check this out. This was great.
Thank you. I'm excited too. Like, people talk about how hyped they are for the new book. I'm like, I don't even know what the new book is yet. So I'm super excited too. I mean, it's written, but now we got to get it all drawn. So, and as I was mentioning before this started to, I'm really bad at stopping myself. So, I went into this Kickstarter campaign saying that it was going to be, I think I said it was going to be a 6-chapter book. And now I'm kind of like, it might be a 7-chapter book as I'm like thinking about what else I want to put into this book. So we'll see. It's going to be somewhere in that range. And we'll all be surprised.
Nice.
I'm excited for the next volume, and I'm excited to be surprised as well. Kevvo, this is a blast. Where can folks find you on the internet if they want to get in touch? You said you got some new social media handles to give out. Where can people
I lost
find you?
pretty much everything. So if you're looking for me on Twitter or Instagram, I'm at zclasscomics, all one word. And then, my website, kevvo.com. Come on out there. I've got a Patreon as well, Z-Class Comics, that is just getting off the ground, but I've got big hopes for that. So, awesome. Come check it out.
Yeah, we'll make sure to put all that stuff in the show notes as well as the Kickstarter link, as well as the link to the last episode that you were on, because we had a really fun conversation way back then, too.
Awesome.
Good luck with the rest of the Kickstarter. Obviously, you're super duper close. I can't wait to see this thing get over the final mark. It's so exciting.
1% away now. I'm so close.
There's links on everything. Make sure you go back this if you guys are hearing this right now. But this is a pleasure. Kara, Danny, thank you guys so much. And Kevvo, thank you again for reaching out and making this whole thing happen with us. I'm so excited to help make sure that this next project happens. Plus, I'm really excited to read it myself. So
thank you.
Next week on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And next week on the show, I didn't write down any notes, so it's just going to be a mystery. Good luck. Have fun. I didn't write it down. I'm really sorry. Actually, I could pull up a schedule right here. Next week on the show, we have a good friend, Zach, back from the Comics That We Love podcast. Me and Kara and him are going to talk about our comic book guilty pleasures for another time. We are just going to be doing that for the episode, which will be really, really fun. As always, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Discord, Goodreads. We got our YouTube, all that other stuff. You can support us at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. Xander is rocking with you. You rocking with him? And I want to say thank you to Kara and Danny. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that down. Thank you to everyone on Twitch and Discord who are hanging out with us. Thank you to Kevvo again. And until next time.
I need to interrupt. We just hit 100%. We just did it.
Oh my God.
Oh, we did it. Yes.
Thank you,
That's
everyone.
amazing.
Oh, that's great. You got your dream came true. You manifested.
It's true. It's true.
Wonderful way to end the show. Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. Oh my gosh. Comics are good though. Listen, this is the proof. Comics are good, and so are you.